In 1985, Ocean Software saw potential for licensed games based on television shows or movies. While they weren't the first, generally speaking, they were the first that did it right. Ocean had a reputation for movie tie-in games that were a quality above the competition, and the pick of these early games was RoboCop. The license was secured for $20,000, and RoboCop released in 1988. The game itself wasn't brilliant. The Amiga version was an average port of the Data East arcade game. It suffered from poor scrolling, and the graphics were average with an annoying border around the gameplay window. RoboCop released on the Amiga in Christmas of 1988, and it was a massive seller. Ocean then quickly prompted sequels RoboCop 2 in 1990 and RoboCop 3 in 1991. Other versions of RoboCop 3 arrived on other platforms as side-scrolling shooters in 1992, but the Amiga, Atari ST and MS-DOS versions of the game were developed by Digital Image Design, who were best known for the development of high-quality flight simulators on the Amiga, such as F-29 Retaliator, and later TFX and EF-2000 on the PC. RoboCop 3 on the Amiga was set in a fully 3D world with many arcade sections including driving, first-person shooting action, flying a gyrocopter, and even a fighting game level. These sections are connected with great and interesting cutscenes that keep the story moving along nicely. In 2020, this game has aged terribly, but in 1991, this was one of the earliest 3D games that was based on a movie that told a story, and was quite impressive technically. RoboCop 3 represented a massive departure from the first two games, which were essentially just side-scrolling arcade-style games. RoboCop 3 was an early 3D-style game that you could say took a lot of inspiration from games like Operation Wolf, but it also had early, first-person shooter elements as well that cannot be ignored. Piracy was a major problem for the Amiga, Atari ST, and MS-DOS computers at the time, and publishers were forced to come up with different ways to try to mitigate the spread of illegal game discs. The Amiga was perhaps the most notorious, with games literally cracked within hours of release, uploaded to bulletin boards worldwide, and in some cases, games were cracked and released even before they hit retail shops. Many publishers tried to beat the pirates and came up with different, more sophisticated ways of copy protecting their games. And another thing that was interesting with RoboCop 3 on the Commodore Amiga and Atari ST was it came with a small dongle which was utilized for its copy protection. Around 1991, many Amiga magazines were talking about a rumor of a special device that was circulated with the game RoboCop 3. Rumors of a special chip that will somehow be attached to a normal disc are being circulated, but Ocean are being extremely tight-lipped about it. According to our source, the chip has over 50 separate levels of protection that after 2 solid weeks hacking by an Ocean programmer would only yield 1 level of clearance. When RoboCop 3 was released, people had noticed that it came with game discs, a manual, and a small device. This device was the idea of Ocean Software's development director at the time, Gary Bracey. These dongles would require you to plug the device in to be able to play the game, and RoboCop 3 was the first ever video game that implemented such a form of copy protection. The dongle would simply plug into the Amiga's joystick port, communicate with the game to authenticate that it was present, and off it went. Without it, the game would simply not load. Ocean Software even boasted in magazines that the copy protection was so sophisticated that it would take a good programmer months and months to crack. It only took cracking group Fairlight just 5.5 hours. So what actually went wrong? How does the copy protection work? What does the dongle actually do? And how did Fairlight end up cracking the game? Dongle copy protections seemingly are very sophisticated, but as we'll see, the one that was used in RoboCop 3 on the Amiga actually was quite simple. We said that the dongle plugged into the Amiga's joystick port. If we look at the memory address map, the joystick port is located at address hexadecimal DFF00C, otherwise known as Joy1 DAT. The dongle would pulse a combination of the fire button and a joystick direction. Notice that the fire button is located at a different address at BFE001. When the dongle generated the pulse, it would flip bit 8 on Joy1 DAT from 0 to 1, and on each pulse would flip the bits back and forth. If there was no dongle connected, Joy1 DAT state would remain the same, so the check would fail and it was assumed that you were running a pirate copy of the game. To crack the game, all that was needed was to find the dongle check in the game code and make it return success each time. But it wasn't that simple. You couldn't just connect a joystick to the port and spam the fire button to emulate the dongle's presence. First of all, the game had 21 dongle checks littered throughout the game, and second, the dongle had a connection between two pins that normally wouldn't be present on a joystick. Furthermore, Ocean knew that crackers would be interested in reading bits from the joystick port, so they obfuscated the checks. They did this in two ways, by using a TVD or trace vector decoder, and by utilizing self-modifying code. The Motorola 68000 at the processor level has what's known as the trace vector decoder or TVD. TVDs was one of the most popular ways to implement copy protection on the Amiga and Atari ST. When a TVD is implemented in code, as it's stepping through, it will decrypt the next instruction in an encrypted code block, execute that instruction, and then re-encrypt it. As it's stepping through encrypted code, eventually will hit a predetermined piece of code which then does the final decryption pass on the code block itself. And until this task is completed, you can't physically see any usable code because everything is encrypted, which means that you can't crack or alter code because you can't see it. RoboCop 3's code was completely encrypted this way, except for one area, the disk loader. This provided Fairlight with a way to crack the encryption and get a look at the dongle check code and crack the game. The dongle checks themselves were also obfuscated, which also included self-modifying code to throw crackers off. So it wasn't as simple as searching for Joy1 DAT or hexadecimal address DFF00C, but it really wasn't that hard. If we consider this block of code, it's 68,000 assembly, but we'll explain it in simple terms. The address hexadecimal 14E62 is loaded into register A0, this is an address register, and then the hexadecimal value 1F3A6 is moved into register D0. This is a data register. What happens next is the two instructions are now subtracting what's in register D0 from the address register A0 with 30 appended to it, and for the second subtraction with 40 appended to it. In other words, subtract 1F3A6 from 14E92, and for the second, subtract 1F3A6 from 14E82. This is where the self-modifying code comes into play. If we take a closer look and see what's in address 14E92, it happens to be E1, E3, B2. So if we logically subtract 1F3A6 from E1, E3, B2, we get the result DFF00C, which happens to be Joy1 DAT, which is the port where the dongle is connected. And the second subtraction gives us hexadecimal BFE001, which is the memory address for the Amiga's CIA chip, which handles fire button presses. With this discovery, the crack was to essentially bypass the fail check and return success, but care had to be taken to ensure that the state of registers and memory was obviously not tampered with. Fairlight had acquired the game at 9:30 AM UK time, and by 5 o'clock the same day, it was cracked 100%. RoboCop 3 has 21 unique copy protection checks like this, but not all of them were coded in the same way, but they all did similar things to the code we just saw. Fairlight cracker Gaston wrote the original crack, while Galahad, who is a well-known Amiga cracker, patched the protection in the later Platinum version, which did not use a dongle at all, but instead used TVD as well as manual copy protection. Ocean's attempt at dongle-based copy protection had well and truly failed. After the crack had circulated, Gary Bracey said not everyone who had an Amiga had programming skills, and we were attempting to deter casual copying at this level. Our hope was to delay the proliferation of copy discs for a short amount of time in order to maximize sales. The measure certainly prevented the casual copier from just duplicating disc to disc, but I agree, it didn't take long for the professional pirates to copy and distribute the game. While it's true the dongle itself had failed, it was largely irrelevant thanks to the reputation in the media leading up to the release of RoboCop 3, which generated a lot of sales. After all, you wouldn't be playing this game unless you had an original copy of it with the dongle included, because there would not be a cracked version anytime soon, at least according to Ocean PR themselves. Incidentally, the Platinum Edition version of the game that was released later had a separate copy protection method and no dongle. We won't ever know if Ocean had ever planned to continue using the dongle after RoboCop 3's copy protection was so easily dispatched, but aside from some embarrassment, it didn't really harm their brand. When I spoke to Galahad from Amiga cracking group Fairlight, who cracked RoboCop 3, he suggested that the protection could have been implemented so much better. Ultimately, the biggest problem, he said, was that by attempting to hide the protection was what gave it away. There you have it, guys. That's the story of RoboCop 3 copy protection on the Amiga. The dongle protection was something that was heavily advertised as being a game changer in the industry, and ultimately it was cracked in about 5.5 hours by Fairlight on the Amiga, and it's an interesting tale to tell, and I really wanted to give thanks to Galahad from Fairlight for providing me with lots of information about the copy protection, the crack and how it all worked, and pretty much the story about how everything went down. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you thought about it in the comments below. If you liked it, you know what to do. Leave me a thumbs up, and as always, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye for now.